I have a clear memory of the day I got married to my wife. At that time, I was 22 years old, standing at the altar, feeling nervous and excited, waiting for the moment when the love of my life would walk down the aisle to join me. My wife was 21 years old, and she looked stunning and graceful on that day. Now, we are both 29 and 28. Our journey began during our high school days when we first met. We were just teenagers, unaware of the exciting adventures that lay ahead. We shared the same classes, dreams, and a passion for the same music. Those days, we would often go to concerts together, immersing ourselves in the melodies and lyrics of our favorite band. Even though neither of us knew how to play an instrument, we used to daydream about being on that stage, performing with our own band. Our schedules were quite busy back then, leaving us with a little time to pursue our musical aspirations. It wasn't until we reached our early 20s that our love for music truly blossomed. We would spend countless hours discussing our favorite songs, analyzing lyrics, fantasizing about one day creating our own music. As time went by, we made a heartfelt promise to ourselves. We pledged that as our two boys grew older, now at age 7 and 5, we would provide them with opportunities we never had. The chance to learn to play a musical instrument. Our oldest son had shown a strong passion in playing the guitar, so we set out to find a talented teacher who could nurture his budding talent. My wife had always possessed a deeper enthusiasm for music than I did. She had crushes on various musicians, something I didn't think much of. After all, everyone has their own harmless fantasies. Her passion for music was contagious, and it only made me love her more. I admire her unwavering dedication to the art form and how she used it to connect with our boys. During those early years of parenthood, my wife worked part-time at the local high school, which left her with plenty of free time to bond with our boys. She became their musical inspiration, introducing them to the magic of music. She would play their favorite tunes on the stereo, and as they danced around the living room, she would sing along, creating beautiful memories filled with laughter and joy. When our son reached the age of 7, my wife and I believed it was the perfect moment to keep our promise and get him into a music class. We wanted to support his growing interest in playing the guitar, but as we pondered our option, my wife had a particular musician in mind, someone she claimed to have noticed performing at a bar. During one of those rare nights we managed to go out together. Little did I know that my wife had taken the initiative that night to approach this musician and exchange contact information. They had struck up a conversation about music, and she had even managed to negotiate an arrangement for guitar lessons with him. She claimed that she had kept all this a secret, waiting for just the right moment to surprise me with the news. I can vividly recall the evening she chose to unveil her plan. It was a cozy night at home. The kids were snugged in their beds, and we were sitting on the couch, enjoying a glass of wine. She had a mischievous sparkle in her eye as she began to talk about our son's upcoming music lessons. You know, she started, a thoughtful look on her face. I have been giving some serious thoughts to who might be the perfect teacher for our young guitarist. I leaned in, intrigued. Who are you thinking of? A smile played on her lips as she admitted, remember that musician we caught performing at the bar a while ago? The one who wowed us with the incredible guitar solo. Recognition dawned on me. Yeah, I remember him. With enthusiasm in her voice, she nodded and said, well, I have actually been in contact with him, and he's agreed to give our son guitar lessons. I was taken aback by the surprise, but unsure about her initiative. You did all this behind the scenes? She chuckled and confirmed my suspicion. I wanted it to be a surprise for both of you. I truly believe he's the perfect teacher for our son, and I know our little one will learn a lot from him. We spent the remainder of the evening hashing out the details of this arrangement. My wife had already negotiated a fair price, and it seemed like our son's guitar lessons were becoming a reality. As the weeks went by and our son's guitar lesson commenced, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease about the situation. My wife had been adamant about hiring the musician from the bar, And although I trusted her judgment in many aspects of life, my instincts were telling me that something didn't quite sit right with this particular choice. I made up my mind to meet the musician in person during one of our son's guitar lessons. When I entered his apartment after he invited us, he was dressed in a rock and roll t-shirt and sporting a meticulously groomed beard. He greeted me with a warm smile, but something still felt off to me. To my perception, he appeared to be more focused on his image and charisma than on his musical expertise. As I observed the lesson, I noticed that while he did possess a certain level of skills, he didn't quite match the level my wife had portrayed. He had musical knowledge, but he didn't strike me as a seasoned professional she had described. No wonder I didn't notice him at the bar when he last played for the crowd. He seemed like he relied on his looks and the attention he received from his female students rather than his actual musical talent. What troubled me more was the dynamics between my wife and the musician. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, a connection that extended beyond the typical professional relationship. They exchanged lingering glance and shared laughter over inside joke, and this only intensified my growing unease. I resolved to have an open and honest conversation with my wife about the concern nagging at me. I voiced my doubts regarding the musician's qualification and my discomfort with the way they seemed to gaze at each other. However, my wife brushed aside my worries, attributing them to jealousy. Without any concrete evidence of wrongdoing, I reluctantly tried to convince myself that I might be overreacting. I allowed our son to continue with his guitar lessons, promising myself that I would stay vigilant and watch for any warning signs. It was a tough decision to make, torn between placing trust in my wife's judgment and listening to my own instincts. I hoped that as time passed, my reservation would fade and our son would indeed benefit from the lesson, as my wife believed. Nevertheless, deep down, a lingering unease persisted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the situation than what met the eye. As the week passed, our son's guitar lessons started to become more frequent and lengthier, with my wife taking on the responsibility of getting him to these sessions. Initially, the lesson lasted for 2 hours, but before long, they stretched to three. While I recognized the importance of nurturing our son's musical talent, these prolonged lessons began to raise some concerns in my mind. With my wife being away during these extended sessions, I found myself entrusted with looking after our 5-year-old son. Balancing my job and parenting became more demanding, particularly because I needed to leave work early to take care of our younger child, while my wife and older son were at the guitar lessons. During the time when it was just my 7-year-old son and me at home, I often encouraged him to practice what he had learned. However, I couldn't help but notice that his skills didn't seem to be progressing as much as I had hoped. It became a source of worry, and I began to question whether these lengthy lessons were truly effective. I made the decision to sit down with my wife and have an honest conversation about my concerns. I asked her about why our son's improvement in guitar playing didn't seem to match the increasing length and frequency of his lessons. Her response caught me off guard. She suggested that our son might have ADHD. Given her background as a part-time school teacher, I initially took her statement seriously. I believed that she had some credibility in making such assessments. However, deep down, I harbored doubts about her diagnosis. I haven't observed any of the typical signs of ADHD in our son. He is a bright and focused child, and I couldn't help but wonder if my wife was searching for an explanation that didn't quite fit the situation. Both of us placed great importance in our son's musical education, but I couldn't ignore the persistent feeling that something wasn't quite right. I needed to strike a balance between having faith in my wife's judgment and seeking a clearer understanding of our son's progress. It was a complex situation that demanded careful consideration and communication to ensure that our son's best interests remained our top priority. One day, I decided to have a talk with my son to understand why he didn't seem to be making progress, despite the extensive training he was supposedly receiving. To my astonishment, my son revealed that he spent most of his time with my wife's parents. His revelation left me shocked and deeply concerned. How could my wife and the musician have led me to believe that our son was undergoing intensive guitar training for hours each week, when, according to my son, they barely practiced for a few minutes before my wife dropped him off at her parents' house. This stark difference between what I had been told and the actual reality of the situation sparked a rush of urgency and frustration within me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously amiss. Moreover, I noticed that there was an unusual transaction on my credit card where $100 was withdrawn and then reimbursed in 24 hours, sometimes every week, which coincided with the days my son went for his lessons. With determination to get to the bottom of things, I initiated my own investigation. I began to discreetly check in my wife's schedule and the musician's availability during the supposed lesson times. It didn't take long for me to discover that my wife's action did not match the story she had been presenting to me. It seemed she had been misrepresenting the situation, and I couldn't comprehend the reason behind her actions. I recognized that I couldn't avoid confronting my wife about the unsettling discovery I had made. However, I was determined to understand her motivation and intention before jumping to conclusion. The weight of my suspicion and the imperative to discover the truth eventually drove me to take drastic action. I arranged for a babysitter to care for our younger son, giving me the opportunity to discreetly trail my wife during her next scheduled music training session with our older son. The music training was meant to happen at the musician's house, and it didn't take long for me to sense that something was awry. As my wife and our son arrived, I discovered that the musician had a girlfriend and a daughter from a previous relationship living with him. This added yet another layer of complexity to the already complicated situation. During that training session, which lasted a mere 15 minutes, my wife dropped off our son at her mother's house. What unfolded next confirmed my worst fears. My wife left her car at her mom's place, and the musician arrived to pick up my wife after she dropped off our son. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, and the truth became painfully undeniable. I followed them, my heart weighed down by a profound sense of betrayal and anger, to a bar located across town. They strolled hand in hand into the bar. There was no mistaking the nature of their relationship. They carried themselves with confidence, the demeanor of a couple deeply in love. After spending a few minutes at the bar, they walked hand in hand to a cheap motel nearby, which explained why I was receiving a charge on my credit card from a hotel. Feeling deceived, humiliated, and consumed with rage, I could hardly believe my eyes. To confirm my suspicions, I decided to call my wife. When she answered, I inquired about her whereabouts, fully aware what she would say. She replied, "Oh, I am still at our son's practice." Her blatant lie was a devastating blow. It felt as though my world was crumbling around me as I grasped the extent of the betrayal, not just towards me, but also toward our son, who had been unwittingly caught in the midst of this deception. It was a profoundly painful moment that would forever alter the trajectory of our family's life. I knew that I had to confront my wife about her action and the devastating consequences they had on our marriage and our children. In the midst of the overwhelming anger and a profound sense of betrayal, my emotions spiraled out of control. The thought of my wife and the musician being together in that motel room was unbearable. I gave them 10 minutes, a simmering rage building inside me, before I made a decision. With trembling hands and my heart pounding in my chest, I approached the door of the motel room. A mix of dread and determination washed over me as I reached the door. Gathering my courage, I knocked loudly and declared, "Open up, police." The musician answered the door, wrapped in a towel. I couldn't contain my anger. I struck him, pulled the towel away, and left him unconscious in the middle of the hallway. I then turned my attention to my wife, who had the audacity to claim, "This isn't what it looks like." I took the room key and locked them out. She was frantically trying to cover up and shouting for my help. I calmly called her mother and told her to come pick up her mother. During the call, she overheard me describing how I caught her with someone claiming to be a musician, and that I will be filing for divorce on Monday. I got into my car and drove to the motel office, informing them that I'll be mailing them the key and warning them not to let them back into the room, as the credit card she has used was now reported as stolen. The motel staff informed me that they will be contacting the police. I then went to her mother's house to pick up my son and brought him home. The motel staff opened the door for her to take her things, but subsequently kicked both of them out. My wife returned home the next day, tearful and begging for forgiveness, admitting her mistake. However, I made the difficult decision to ask her to leave the house and stay with her mother. The following day, I consulted a lawyer and initiated divorce proceedings. Thank you for staying to the end of this video. Please support this channel by liking and also subscribing. Now let's get some reaction in the comment section. Thank you and have